Hello, boys and girls. My hope is now that you're about done with your sequence assignment with your partner, the 38 facts, finding the secret phrase to the question, how does the legislative branch symbolize the phrase, we the people? This is a great overview of some of the main points from that sequence assignment. Make sure you look at it. When you're done taking the notes, glue it on page 22. 22. All right, here it goes. We know the framers of our Constitution set up, and here's a term you got to know, a bicameral legislature. Bicameral legislature. Okay? This means two houses. We've got our House of Representatives and our Senate. Remember, this plan came from the Virginia Plan idea, the larger states idea. And it said that we are going to take the House and base representation on population and take the Senate base representation based on equality. This really satisfied both the large and the small states so that there was some compromise made so that could get us working together and get the ground rolling. All right, we know that the number one job of Congress is to make laws and that these laws affect three areas of our life, our school, and our community. Congress, the seats, the representatives, remember there's 435 in our House of Representatives and 100 in the Senate. Those seats in the House of Reps are apportioned or distributed every 10 years based on a census. Remember, the official count of the people. So in Wisconsin, we have a total of 8 reps based on population. But if we look at California, they have 53. Okay? There's a way to influence the numbers in a way. It's called gerrymandering, and that's drawing district lines that favor a particular political party. So let's take a look at what exactly that looks like. We got a nice little image here. Let's say this is Wisconsin right here. The blue represents Democrats, the red Republicans. Clearly, overall in the state of Wisconsin, blue would win. There's more blue than there are red. But through gerrymandering, drawing crazy lines throughout a city or a state, we can get a different result. And this is kind of cool, but in one sense you might think it's unconstitutional or illegal. And in some cases, that would be an accurate thought, but it's not always the case. So if we look at the right here, we can see the two districts that blue wins, as noted here, would be this C and this C. But then if we carefully draw in this T, the field goal post, and this other T, tilt them sideways, we get 3 red victories. Okay? So, interesting thing to do. It has happened in our country's past. Something to be aware of. Gerrymandering, redrawing the district lines in favor of a political party. All right. Members of Congress, when they're elected, have special privileges. You know, making a bill, a law, can be very boring, but you get these pretty cool privileges that you can take advantage of. Don't forget about the franking privilege, the ability to send mail anywhere in the country for free. You can't be sued or arrested for the things you say in Congress. This is to protect the freedom of debate. Imagine that. You're not always hearing just one side of the story, what's good about a bill, but you can hear the opposite side, the negative. Hearing both can help us make a better decision, not only as a congressman or senator, but also for everybody as a whole. And there's some value to that, I think. All right. Remember, when people work in Congress, most of it is done in committees, and the House has more committees than the Senate. It's a basic rule there. Next slide. Congress also has special powers. Let's look at each one and see what they can do. Remember Richard M. Nixon over here. The House can start the impeachment process. Bill Clinton, Richard Nixon, and a couple other presidents were actually went through the impeachment process, and the House did convict them. I shouldn't say that. They accused them of wrongdoings or mistreatment within their office. That's one thing that they have as a special power. They also get to elect the president in the event of a tie. This has actually happened in our nation's history. It was in the 1820s We will get to that semester too. The Senate's privileges or powers, here are those. They act as the judge in impeachment trials. They get to elect the vice president in the event of a tie. And they get to approve or reject, can you think of it? Starts with a T, treaties, we've gone over that before. And they get to approve presidential appointments. This is not the dentist. This is things like the Supreme Court justices. So Donald Trump is going to be able to probably appoint, that means recommend, a couple of people for service in the Supreme Court who serve for life. They have to be approved by the Senate. This is something that President Obama in 2016 has had trouble doing. We currently have 8 justices. He's recommending somebody, but it's got to get approval of the Senate first. Don't forget about the franking privilege. We've mentioned earlier the right to send mail for free. And on to D. Another power of Congress is called the elastic clause. This is an important one to remember. Elastic means to stretch. Think of a rubber band. Okay? This allows Congress to stretch their powers or their given powers in the Constitution to pass laws after the Constitution was written. Let's look at an example about the military. To set up a military training academy was not something specifically stated in the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't say the government can do this, but it says that the government can create an army and a navy. That was old news for us. So because of that, it's kind of implied that if we can have an army and a navy, we can set up a national training center like West Point to train our individuals to help protect our country. So this is an important one to remember, the elastic clause in implied powers. So it's a power that you have because it's assumed that you have it. Okay? Hope that makes sense. Third and final page here. The power to impeach, right, is another power that Congress has. The House, remember, gets to draw up the charges of impeachment, and then the Senate gets to act as the jury. Remember, though, if it does go to a jury, 2/3 of the individuals need to actually vote for removal of the president. So if we look at Bill Clinton, he was voted accused of wrongdoings. He was impeached by the House. He went to Senate. They did not decide to throw him out. There are limits on Congress's power, however. The Supreme Court, noted right here, gets to decide if Congress has ever abused their power. This is part of the system of checks and balances. They get to check the president when he makes treaties. They get to check Congress in the laws that they make. They can deem any law unconstitutional. If that's the case, there it goes. The 10th Amendment, something you also probably remember from your sequence, also was put together to say that states get to keep all the powers not granted to them by national government or our federal government. An example of this would be like issuing state licenses that we mentioned earlier. Okay, many positive things that come from our government system is that there's the federal level and the state level, and everything that the federal level doesn't control falls within the state. And that's nice because each state is way different than the others. You know, living in Alaska, snow removal was a major thing. It was huge. It was necessary at a moment's notice. You needed the streets cleared for emergencies and just daily life. But if you go down to Texas, they might have one snowplow for an entire city. And if it snows an inch, school's canceled, the whole city shuts down. So the state really gets some power in our system to decide what's best for it. And that's very valuable for you and for me. Another big thing in our sequence was how bills become laws. And make sure you know steps 1 through 12 for your test on Wednesday. Okay? Laws, remember they start out as ideas, but the rule is only members of Congress can introduce them. Remember, there's 5 groups of people that can start laws: citizens, committees, organized groups, congressmen, and I'm forgetting the 5th, but there's 5 groups of people that can start laws. Bills They get sent to committees to be written, rewritten, and to be studied. Okay? Each bill is read a total of 3 times, and the third time is the quorum when the majority of people are there, where there's a vote. If it passes the House, it is immediately sent to the Senate, where it can be passed or it can be blocked by things called a filibuster. Ranting and chatting for hours and hours. Known fact is that one of the senators at one point in our nation's history even read Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham at a filibuster to stop voting on a law. I think that's crazy, but it's also a really great way to kind of check the other house a little bit, just to make sure that there's some time to think over some of these laws that are passing. All right, letter F. If it passes the Senate, the president has a few options. He can definitely sign the bill and it becomes a law. He can veto it, just say, no thank you. Or he can Paco veto the bill, which means to let it die. It dies after 10 days of inaction or no action. Congress, however, in this case, if it is vetoed, can override the president's veto with a 2/3 vote in both houses. All right, that pretty much sums up our review of the legislative branch. You should be all set, ready to go now to do awesome on your test on Wednesday. I'm hoping that you are studying your notes, page 18 through 22. I would look over my scavenger hunt. I would also look over my study guide that you received from me earlier this week. All right, kiddos, that's it. Good luck.